U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates mentioned in his speech this morning about a deployment of light littoral combat ships to Singapore. I was wondering how big the deployment is, whether it's a permanent deployment, and as far as disaster supplies they will bring to Singapore, how much disaster supplies will be actually stationed here?
We welcome Secretary Gates' statement that Singapore and the United States would want to continue to deepen our cooperation and engagement under the Strategic Framework Agreement that was signed in 2005. In that agreement, we've stated, as with others, that the U.S. Strong presence and continued engagement in this area has been and will continue to be a critical force of stability and progress for this region. In that spirit, we welcome, we are open to his proposal for forward deployment of the littoral combat ships in this area so that it allows them to achieve that purpose of having a strong presence, continued presence in the Asia-Pacific region. In terms of details of how big the ships are, how many men, I'll leave it to the staff to provide you, but these are usually ships that are manned by about 75 crew per ship, and equivalent to our frigates, which have about 70 men. So we shouldn't overplay the significance of what it means, but it does allow them to forward deploy the littoral combat ships, and if we can assist them as we under the Strategic Framework Agreement, Singapore will be happy to.
Doctor, I'm from Asahi Shimbun. Can I just find out that just now during the lunch, did any countries' ministers mention about the South China Sea issue? And also, what is your stance on, because recently we read reports that Vietnam and Philippines had some problems with China at South China Sea. What is your view on this?
Well, it is traditional that we give only general aspects of the lunch, so I wouldn't want to break that tradition in terms of a ministerial lunch, because, as you know, then it allows us to have candid discussions. So, apart from the ministerial lunch, you would have known that from the last meeting in Jakarta a month ago, the joint declaration from the ASEAN Defence Ministers meeting, as well as the statements from the ASEAN Regional Forum, the stance of ASEAN in terms of the South China Sea. Singapore is not a claimant state, and we have said that our interest, as with other user states, lies in our concern and that about freedom of navigation along the seas as well as air flights, and of course that disputes understandably and productively should be settled peacefully and according to international law, and these are clear articulations that everybody feels is a sensible way forward. Specifically, we have said that the Declaration of Conduct that was signed between China and ASEAN in 2002, that a practical step forward is to implement this Declaration of Conduct into a Code of Conduct.
Now, Dr. Ng, earlier in the morning, Dr. Gates spoke at length about America's or U.S. continual commitment in this region, despite budgets being cut and military spending could see a possibility of it being cut. How do you see this? How significant do you think this is?
I think Secretary Gates said it best, that he's up for a wager of $100 that in 5 years' time that the U.S. will continue to be engaged. So if you, I'm sure you can take him up on the offer, which basically he's saying that he believes the U.S. understands the strategic importance of this area. As I've mentioned, almost all ministers who spoke recognized that. Some have gone on so far as to say that this is the Asia-Pacific century. But whatever the acronyms or the appellations, the trends are clear that both the economic, the political rate shift eastwards into the Pacific. And we have always affirmed that the U.S. continued strong presence of the U.S. is a force of stability, has been a force of stability in this region, and we would want them to continue being so.
Can we have one last question, please?
Prime Minister Najib talked about the suggestion for a rapid response team in response to disasters in this area. Will Singapore support this idea?
Yes, indeed. I would say that all countries represented around the table in the ministerial lunch supported the idea. It's a very sensible idea. We don't know when natural disasters will strike. No one country, if the scale of disaster is large, will have the capacity to respond quick enough and decisively enough. And those conditions, two conditions, obviously point to a need to have some pre-planning, to risk sharing, if you like, and resource sharing. The mechanics of who puts what, who gets what, how do you do it are details. But in principle, we all support the idea, and this is why among the 5 expert working groups, HADR, Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief, was identified as one key area which China and Vietnam are undertaking. And we look forward to them proposing a plan, and I think where we can, it will be to our interests as well for Singapore to participate, because one never knows. We are blessed geographically, but one never knows. You could easily be hit by a natural disaster and need help.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Minister.